Picture it, 1998.
Okay.
14-year-old Indy is staying up real late, like I always do. And I loved late night talk shows.
Right.
That was a thing I loved as an early teen. So I was watching Letterman, and I think it was like Val Kilmer was on. And for the musical guest, they had the cast of the Broadway revival of Cabaret.
Oh.
I had not really seen any musicals to this point. I was not a musical kid. I mean, I liked like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and stuff.
Right.
But that was about the extent of it.
Like Broadway musicals.
Yeah, so then I saw this. I saw Alan Cumming performing Willkommen.
Oh.
And I was like, oh shit, what's this? Do I like musicals? And I guess that makes sense. We'll probably talk about it. This is kind of an anti-musical in a lot of ways. It's the musical haters musical, perhaps. And I don't hate musicals, of course, but that was the first time I saw it. So then I went, I think I had to go to the library and I got the soundtrack for the original cast because the revival one wasn't out yet.
Right. There was no Broadway revival recording.
Not yet. And I think maybe I like downloaded stuff on Kazaa or something.
Oh
Napster,
my God,
maybe?
Napster.
I think it was around that time.
LimeWire?
I think that was maybe a couple of years later that I got to
Okay.
do that. Because 98, I think it was still pretty new. Internet in the home, honestly.
Internet in the home was still like dial-up, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It was definitely dial-up. But I mean, just having it in your home was a pretty big deal.
True.
And that's how I discovered Cabaret, got real into it. And all these years later, the first musical I gave a chance to, it's my favorite musical.
Aww. I like that story. That's fun.
So that's how I had discovered Cabaret. And you discovered it just
This weekend.
This week. So I guess we should get started. I was going to say welcome, everybody.
Bienvenue.
Willkommen. Bienvenue.
Welcome.
to another episode of I Love This, You Should Too. I'm your host, the happiest corpse you ever will see, Indy Randawa, and with me is Samantha Green Fingernails Randawa.
Oh, I should have done green fingernails.
You really should, but maybe for Christmas.
Maybe for Christmas. I'm trying to avoid Christmas nails because it's still November.
See, when I see green nails, I think Sally Bowles nails.
Ah. Yeah, I'll have to do some green nails in honor of Sally Bowles.
In case this is your first episode of this podcast, we take turns picking movies, making the other person watch them, and then forcing them into discussion and debate.
Is that what we do?
That was what we were going to do, but then we kind of just chit-chat.
Yeah.
And analyze. We got real analytical.
Yeah, we have. I feel like I'm better for it. I don't know if it's everything that you wanted it to be.
Oh, everything and more. But we're doing all musicals this month. Samantha is a big musical lover. I am a big film lover. And I think musicals are just as valuable as any other type of art. So I like the good ones. I dislike the bad ones. But Cabaret was my favorite. And so that was my pick. And I got Samantha to watch it for the very first time. And before we get into my opinions on whether it held up, because I'd actually probably only seen this once, and that was 20 years ago. Samantha, what are your thoughts on Cabaret? Or, as the title suggests, I love this movie. Did you?
I loved it.
You loved it.
It was pretty great.
It is pretty great.
It was a fun time to watch. We were singing the songs after when we weren't watching it. And I feel like that's the mark of a really good show is when it's like kind of stuck in your head all week. And I do feel like I've had some of the songs like just floating through my head on and off. I really, really liked it. I'm really excited to talk about it with you because I feel like you're going to have all sorts of really cool things to teach me about.
Oh, I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully I'll have something. Honestly, when we do a lot of these movies, or the ones that I really love, I kind of have essays written, ready to go. Not ready to go, but I pontificate a lot. I don't think that's going to be the case in this one as much, even though there's so much to talk about. I think we're going to kind of go through it pretty much chronologically, and we'll just chat. I know you're going to want to talk about the songs.
Yeah.
I'll probably throw in a bunch of stuff too, but based on what you're saying, though, I hope we get a chance to see the stage play because I think you would prefer that.
Yeah.
There are more songs, and I think the stuff that perhaps you didn't like as much, based on what we've talked about through 40 episodes or whatever we're at, that the elements that you didn't like are unique just to the film.
Yeah.
So the 98 revival is kind of my touchstone for Cabaret. That's how I got in. That's the soundtrack that I own. That's the one I listen to so much and that I love so much. I never actually saw this movie until a few years after that, and I haven't seen it since. So I probably saw this when I was like 20 or so and haven't seen it since. And at the time, I was not terribly impressed because it just wasn't the version that I loved so much. Upon this rewatch now, it made me do two kind of contradictory things. It made me like the musical portion of this one less. Then that's to say, I don't think it's as good of a musical as the stage play, specifically the one that I love so much with Natasha Richardson and Alan Cumming. But this is a fantastic movie. It's so much better of a movie than I had given it credit for, and I kind of now get why it was so like adored by the Academy and everything like that.
Yeah, because this won some serious awards.
It won 8 Oscars.
Wow.
Both Joel Grey and Liza Minnelli won theirs. It's the most Oscars ever won by a movie that did not win Best Picture, because it came out in the same year as a little movie called The Godfather. But Joel Grey beat Al Pacino.
Wow.
I still think, I don't think that's deserved, but I think Al Pacino should have been nominated for Best Actor, but not Best Supporting Actor. And there were 3 Godfather actors in that category, and I feel like they split the vote of Godfather fans, and then Joel Grey kind of swept in.
Because he was like not in The Godfather.
Yeah. Also, Bob Fosse won over Francis Ford Coppola for Best Director. Which
Oh, wow.
I don't know about that either, but good for him. It's fantastic either way.
Yeah, that's a big deal, especially because The Godfather is such a huge thing still.
Yeah. And this was the only musical, or first, I guess, musical to ever be rated X.
Oh, right. You told me that it was rated X. I forgot that X was a rating.
Yeah, now
Other than
say,
like jokey, like, oh, it's adult.
Yeah.
It's X.
X used to just be the equivalent of our R or NC-17,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
But yeah, I forgot that things were rated X, and that makes it seem so sexy.
And it is.
It is very sexy, yes.
So we'll break it down. Do you have anything you want to open with? What is this movie about to you?
A cabaret dancer who meets a normal man and considers being with him, but also the Nazis taking over Germany.
I think it's a movie about political apathy, first and foremost.
I could see that. And I think it's really interesting, both last week's movie and this week's movie, just the different attitudes about the Nazis slowly taking over, or quickly taking over, I guess.
I'm glad we watched Sound of Music just the other week, because I had some criticisms of that movie. It's not my favorite like it is yours.
Yeah.
And I said, it's no Cabaret. And it is such a great piece to go side by side, because of course they deal with very similar subject matter, but they come at it in 2 incredibly different ways.
Yeah.
And I always talk about the cinema of the 70s being my favorite decade, because there was this realness, this grittiness, heroes lived in the gray areas, all of that. That's Cabaret. We talk about like Taxi Driver and The Conversation as being the big touchstones of the 70s, but Cabaret is the 70s in musical form perfectly. It does so much of that, even though it's dealing with things happening in the 30s. It epitomizes so much of the landmarks of 70s cinema. So let's go through it. First off, it starts, no big overture, silence.
Which is so weird, because we totally were like, is it broken? Did we get a bad copy of this?
I thought my receiver wasn't working.
Yeah, it was unnerving.
Yes.
Way to start this.
And that seems very intentional. This movie and the direction, I think, goes out of its way to unnerve you. It does a lot of that, a lot of playing with not just sound, but kind of grotesque imagery, and the editing can be choppy at times to try to elicit that sort of response from you.
Yeah.
And it sets it up quite quickly as, I know people always talk about postmodernism and you overuse it, but I think this is kind of a postmodern musical, right? It's taking the pieces that we know of a musical and playing with them, messing with it, and using it kind of as a commentary on the genre even.
I feel like calling it like an anti-musical or something would be good, because it's not like Sound of Music or any of these musicals that were like really, I feel like musicals were happy a lot of the time, and this is like the opposite of it. And I think it's like a really interesting, and I think, like you said, important piece of musical theater history.
Yeah, it's definitely a departure. Of course, that's not the first musical to deal with kind of touchy subject matter. There were a bunch before, but one of the first big ones for sure. And to have so many kind of, maybe not the first in each thing, but doing it all and so well.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I feel like musicals weren't written about the people who were singing at the time, I guess.
Right.
Like, unless you were what Sally wanted to be, an actress, you weren't living this glamorous, sparkly life. You were singing in cabarets, and you were singing where you could get stage time, and you were basically like just making money to live. And it wasn't quite as happy and bubbly as some of the musicals of this time would lead you to believe.
Yeah, right away with this one, with the silence, first of all, and then as soon as we see the club, we're instantly shown that this isn't going to be one of those musicals that we're used to coming off of the 50s and 60s. It has that silence. This cabaret that we see is kind of shitty looking.
It is.
There's nothing lavish or glamorous. When we have the Sound of Music having helicopter flyovers in these beautiful mountains, singing about the hills are alive, here we have the shitty cabaret. When we meet Sally, one of the first things she's talking about is like, oh, when I hook up with random dudes, I prefer to go to their place. And it's showing you like this, there's no nuns in this one.
And it's not glamorous.
And we start off with the welcoming song, Willkommen, which is great.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I was expecting kind of a flashier look to the club.
And then when you look like, oh, these dancers look ill.
Yeah, and the like costumes are very clearly just out of thrift stores or like closets.
Did you know that? So literally they are from thrift stores in Germany.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Joel Grey would talk about how bad his suit smelled. Because it was all just like old stuff.
Yeah.
Not all. The majority of it was, though.
I kind of figured that. And I think it's really like, it's like a nice addition. Because I feel like we were saying as we were watching a little bit today over dinner, I think if it was made now, we may lose that effect.
Oh, definitely. Right after this, we were all hopped up on Candor and Ebbs. So we watched a little Chicago. And right away, I was like, no. It's not as good. I get that the songs and everything, but the movie of Chicago has nothing on the movie of Cabaret, and it's because of things like that.
Yeah.
There we go to a jail, and everyone looks great.
Everyone's, got fresh curls and
It starts in a
costumes.
seedy club. So after watching Cabaret, when people look like they worked at a seedy club, everyone is a perfectly sculpted Calvin Klein model in the club there.
And their outfits are beautiful and
everything's
look brand new. And it was really interesting to see that. And I think it added to the ambiance of what this club is.
Yeah, and I know I keep drilling down on it whenever there's an opportunity, but that was the 70s in cinema, and that's kind of why I loved it. It had that, like, the cinema verite, but to a new, that's like realism, like true realism, that things look like they should look. The people in this movie look like just people.
Yeah.
The people in this who are on stage at a club are arguably, and probably so, uglier than people who would be ugly people and being made fun of as being ugly in a modern movie.
Right. Yeah. I guess we were talking about Chicago. The difference, it's like most people don't know how to do good stage makeup, right? Like it's not something that everyone inherently knows how to do. And these people are clearly just like working with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's blue eyeshadow and a lot of white face paint and, you know, some red lipstick and you're good to go.
And in addition to that realism, it adds like a certain grotesqueness. And I don't want to say like, oh, these people are hideous. It's quite intentionally so. They're trying to make this grotesque and unappealing, and we'll get into all the reasons why as we go. Well, we're still on the first song. We need to get going. I love, though, that when he's introducing everyone, it's just like, oh, and from America, Sally Bowles.
Yeah.
And just she goes right on.
Yeah.
And we see these other acts, but I wonder what they're doing.
I want to see all the acts in this.
Yeah.
And I wonder if in the stage show you get to see a little bit more of that.
Not those ones.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I think it's a great way to start the musical. You get to meet a bunch of people. It's like a good introduction to what this whole world is.
It definitely is. It sets you up for what you're going to be expecting in the rest of the movie.
And what it's going to look like, because you see a range of people and various outfits, and like you kind of get an idea of what you're in for. And you see some of the audience too.
All of that cross-cutting, I think, is very important because it's well, of course, it's showing the audience, but having the ability to show a cross-section of Germany and do that a few different times is important for what they build up to later on, especially ending with the big mirror finale that we get. And the other unique thing about this, every song in this is a diegetic song, meaning that this could not be a musical.
Right.
You know, like, is this a musical even? Because usually the hallmark of musicals is that people are just
singing their emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the music is coming from somewhere, who knows, like from their emotions, essentially.
But there's a band.
Yeah.
Or an orchestra, I guess. And they're only singing for like when it makes sense in the cabaret show to sing.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was like, oh, that's so different that here they're not just singing their emotions. You actually have to follow along with the story. And then you listen to the songs and they are 100% absolutely singing their emotions.
But they're doing it in a way that doesn't feel like a musical where they just randomly break into song.
And rather than just saying their emotions, it's things that are being alluded to.
Yeah, which I like.
Like Mine Hair, we'll talk about that because that was Sally's first big song. And it sets up her character so much. And so many of the other songs also, if you listen to it, you're like, oh, that explains this. It's either foreshadowing or the character reflecting on something or kind of giving their backstory.
Yeah.
So rather than just saying like, I'm happy, now I'm going to go sing the song about being happy and how happy I am at this moment, it's character development that you couldn't easily get in a non-musical setting because you couldn't have, well, I guess you could just have someone say like, this is the way I am, why I am.
Yeah.
And here is my character. And bad movies often do that. And musicals have a nice little shortcut that they can get away with doing that.
Yeah, you can sing.
And even in this movie where they're not quite doing that, it's a really interesting way to kind of get the same effect. And I think even in a better way because it's usually a little more insightful than just singing about what's happening at the moment.
Yeah.
So let's get into Mine Hair.
Perfect.
First of all, fucking kills.
Such a good song.
So good.
Such a good song.
Bye, my Liebe, farewell, my Liebe. It was a fine affair, but now it's over. And though I used to care, I need the open air. You're better off without me, Mine Hair. Don't dab your eye, Mine Hair, or wonder why, Mine Hair. I've always said that I was a rover. You mustn't knit your brow, you should have known by now. You'd every cause to doubt me, Mine Hair. Bye-bye, sei mein lieber Herr. Auf Wiedersehen, mein Herr, es war sehr gut, mein Herr, und vorbei. Du kennst mich wohl, mein Herr, ach, lebe wohl, mein Herr, du sollst mich nie mehr sehen, mein Herr.
I love Liza Minnelli's voice.
Oh, she's fantastic. What a treasure.
Listen, sorry, this thought might be a little all over the place, but we've listened to 3 or 4 different versions of Cabaret because there are quite a few cast recordings out there. Liza Minnelli does it in a way that really suits the character of Sally Bowles, this like kind of all over the place, disorganized, kind of frantic young girl. And I think that she does a really good job of singing like that. And I think that's something that Natasha Richardson kind of lacks. And I've never seen her actually physically play the role, so maybe it's a bad comparison. But I think Liza Minnelli does it in a way that really makes sense for who Sally is and what her character does throughout the movie.
Of course, I had to come defend Natasha Richardson.
Of course,
I loved her performance so much.
Nothing against Natasha Richardson.
No, absolutely. I think the good thing about Natasha Richardson, she's clearly not as strong of a straight up singer.
No.
Like no one's going to really compete
Very
with Liza
different
on
ranges,
that.
yeah.
But that works.
Yeah.
For Sally. In this movie where people look like they would look, having someone who is at this like third-rate cabaret not be a terrific singer is completely fine. And I'm not sure, but I had imagined some of the criticism at the time was like, she's too good. Why is she in this cabaret? But I think what she brings to it is a naivete, a rawness, and a sense of desperation almost in her singing.
Desperation is a good way to put it.
And I think that could be said with the performances of most people in this movie. There is a certain manic energy behind this movie, even though it's not not nearly as quick-paced as, I would say, pretty much every other musical ever made. There is that kind of energy behind it, a nervous energy and a desperation for something to happen. This movie is crafted very patiently, but there is not a lot of patience by the characters.
Yeah, and I think that Liza Minnelli does such a good job of portraying Sally, who is someone who is literally singing for her supper.
Yeah.
Like she needs the money. And if she doesn't do well, she won't have food or she won't have gin or she won't have a roof over her head. And you can feel that in her performance, just how quickly her life could slide the other way and become destitute. And I think you really feel that.
And on a larger scale, of course, that's reflecting the desperation in Germany of the time.
Yeah.
That's how the Nazis came into power. That's how fascists always come into power. It's times of desperation where people are looking to cling on to something.
Yeah.
And we'll probably just keep getting into it, but if you go further along that line, Sally is someone who is desperate for attention, for love. Mm-hmm. She wants someone to love her, to care about her. And at the time in Germany, if you are someone who is looking for any sort of human interaction, you're looking for some sort of respite from your life, and somebody comes along and gives you hope, you're going to go with it. Yeah. And maybe that someone is a Nazi, and that's how this gets going, right?
I think, that
they prey on the desperate.
They prey on the desperate and the lonely, and they make you feel like you're part of something. Yeah. And that's all that Liza really wants in the world, is to feel like somebody cares about her and that she has like a reason.
God damn, this it's great, man. And we started talking about a little bit after we watched it first, and we had to like stop.
Yeah, because we were so excited.
We're like, save it. Save it. But okay, back to Mein Herr.
Okay.
I love how the pace of it builds.
Yes.
There aren't many songs in musicals that you'll be like nodding your head along to, and then by the end, like stomping your foot along with. And Mein Herr does that. It's great. I'd kind of forgotten how good it was.
I like this one, and I do feel like the tempo kind of reflects Sally's whole story arc throughout the musical as well. I feel like towards the end with the baby and getting married and the the threat of the Nazis and everything. I feel like it is that really fast, like loud spinning.
It starts off and you think you're in control,
Yeah.
and then it just goes and goes and goes, and
Exactly.
suddenly,
And suddenly you're out of control, and it's very loud and like crazy. And I feel like it's a really good representation of her whole thing in this movie.
See, that's the other reason I named this as my favorite musical. The music itself is reflective of the story, right? There are songs in this that are microcosms for entire themes that they're talking about, and not just in the lyrics, but how the pacing is. And that's just, it's brilliant. It works on so many levels. And maybe I just don't love musicals as much as you, and I don't see it in other ones, but it just seems, to someone who's more literate in the world of film than of music, a movie like this and a musical like this has so many things that I can be like, I can break it down and I can see the point of so much of it. And that's why it always stands out to me.
Yeah.
But Brian, right? I always want to say Cliff. He's
Brian.
Cliff usually.
Oh,
But Brian should have listened.
What a weird name to have in a 1930s musical.
There's so many Brians out there.
Were there?
Brian, I feel like that's a pretty common name.
I feel like that's such a modern name that.
Well, I think it's kind of gone now.
Oh.
I work with a lot of babies. There's no baby Bryans anymore.
Oh, really?
Oh, everyone named Brian is over 30.
True. Actually, no. There were 3 Brians in my elementary school class.
Oh, yeah. I had 3 as well.
One of mine. Yeah. I feel like it was very, very popular around our age. And then
Yeah.
Baby Brian is weird. That's a weird baby name.
Even weirder than Baby Cliff.
Yeah.
Cliff was his name usually when he's British.
Oh, okay.
But he should have listened, because she's telling him right there, like, I'm not going to change.
No.
People think they can change me, but you can't. I mean, you can't
Like-
turn vinegar into jam,
No.
Mine hair.
I wasn't kidding.
A lion is a lion, not a lamb, mine hair.
Yeah. I wasn't
She
kidding.
just tells
I'm
you.
a rover.
Yeah.
It's not going to be.
Of course, we don't know her at this point, and you just kind of think it's a song. And then you watch the movie and be like, oh, she just told you exactly what's
Exactly
going
who
to
she
happen.
is,
If
yeah.
you try to fall in love with her, she's fickle.
Yeah.
She has whims.
She's wild. Man, yeah, it's a really great way to tell the audience without them realizing, and then having that like full circle moment towards the end when it's all like happening on screen.
Yeah, a musical's so interesting in that way. And maybe I think this is a little separate because it is a song that is on stage, that we don't take it to be completely literal. While if in Sound of Music that started and
Yeah.
it was a non-diegetic song, just something that's in her own mind, kind of presumably.
Yeah.
You would be like, oh, she's just telling you who she is.
Yeah,
And
it is.
here you
it's-
kind of get a little cheat because it doesn't seem like that.
It's
but
like
it absolutely
sneaky.
is. Yeah.
Because you're like, is she just singing whatever cabaret song on stage that's popular, or is this her internal dialogue?
Both.
Both.
And then I just love the energy that she brings to everything, because we get the meeting of her and Brian, and how she calls the cigarettes wildly devastating and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. She reminds me a bit of like Holly Golightly.
My next line right underneath that said, very Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah, she's like they have a very similar type of speech, as well as just like life arc.
Well, and then the love stories
Yeah.
also very similar,
Very
especially if you go
similar.
get the book of
Yes.
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Which is totally different from the movie. Everybody
Yeah.
go read the book.
The book is quite similar to Cabaret in a lot of ways.
It is
especially in that
actually, yeah.
relationship.
And you get that like darkness that they totally edited out in Breakfast at Tiffany's, the movie.
Still a good movie,
Still,
but
it's a
different
great movie. But
Real racist, though.
yes.
And then we have that wrestling scene, which is I made to disgust.
Yeah.
I'd imagine.
There were some interesting moments in this where I was like, that's not, like, that's uncomfortable.
And I think that's exactly
Yeah.
it. I think it's intercut with shots of the audience. So we get to kind of associate the two. We associate this disgusting thing we're seeing, these little flashes of, with these people laughing at it. And the subtext is kind of look at what people are laughing at when all of that's happening outside.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a couple times in this movie where you get the Cabaret being crazy and frantic and like all over the place, cut with what's actually happening in the real world, like when that man's being beaten up by Nazis. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting comparison, I guess.
And I think in the stage play, the character of the MC kind of morphs into different characters.
Right.
And is almost like an apparition. He can kind of walk through things without being in that world, and he takes on different roles.
Right.
And you couldn't really do that, especially the way they went with this movie being very realist. So to get those points across of having the parallels of the music with what's going on in the outside world, I thought that intercutting was a very effective way to do that.
Yeah, I liked that. And I'm not a huge fan of Joel Grey's host.
Sure.
I think Alan Cumming, I have seen a few clips of him being the host, and I think that he is, I don't know, I think I like him better.
Well, Alan Cumming's a fucking treasure, and I love him, so...
Yeah, I feel like I
won't argue with that.
I want to see Liza Minnelli and Alan Cumming in this.
Oh, wow.
I want that cast.
Maybe I could edit it together.
But yeah, I feel like Joel Grey was just a little too creepy.
But if that's what you're going for,
yeah.
I would agree that it is less enjoyable. But that's clearly, I just love Alan Cumming. And
like, I felt like it took me out because he was so creepy or like weird.
He was a little harder to figure out for me.
Yeah.
Because Alan Cumming plays it creepy as well and weird, but I could understand what he is trying to do. And with Joel Grey's, I had a little bit of a harder time with that.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
The next bit that I really liked was that screaming under the train.
Yes.
Because that's kind of outside of Mein Herr. That's her introduction. And just in case you thought that she was just another one of those characters, like kind of quirky and eccentric, but I'm a free spirit. Not unlike Maria.
Yes.
Right? For that world. But then when you see her under the subway screaming, you realize that, no, there's something else going on here. There's something in her that needs to get out. There is that desperation I was talking about. And it's mixed with when she does scream and gets a chance to let it out, there's this weird euphoria. There's an embarrassment and almost a sexual euphoria that she kind of goes through right after as well.
Yeah.
Normally, I would say maybe I'm seeing too much into things if you see anything sexual, but in this movie, everything's very sexual. So there's a very orgasmic quality.
Yeah, and she's shy and kind of giggly after, and you can see that kind of broke her facade for a minute.
Yeah.
And I think that's when Brian really realizes that he likes her, because he gets to see this real part of her. For a moment.
There's not many of those.
No.
She's a performer through and through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then we get that scene you were talking about of that guy who throws a Nazi out of the club and then gets beaten up, and it's intercut with the performance on stage. Usually when we see Nazis portrayed in film, we mostly see American films.
Yeah.
And they always take out all of the anti-communist stuff. Right? Because the Americans are so anti-communist, they can't be like, well, we agreed with them on this one. So that was nice that all the propaganda posters are what they were, which was very anti-communist.
And there's that line about letting the Nazis take care of the communists.
Right. That's a big one.
And it's really interesting because, you don't hear as much. And I kind of had forgotten just how prominent the communists were at the time with the Nazis, and that it was these two kind of warring groups, and then the people who kind of considered themselves to be like the regular everyday Germans until they became Nazis. But it was really interesting to see that war between those two groups.
And now if you call someone a communist in the Western world, it's like the worst thing. But if you do like a bunch of Nazi stuff, so you're like, yeah, you could still be elected to office. You know what? History another day. Let's go on. And we get the introduction of Fräulein Landauer and is it Fritz?
Fritz, yeah.
Fritz. So these characters I don't think are in the play, because we have a whole thing with Fräulein Schneider, the hostess, or what would you call her? Landlord person?
Landlady.
There's a word for what she is. Innkeeper?
I don't know. I don't think
Anyways,
it's like an inn,
her
though.
and Herr Schultz are the equivalent in the play, and they sing to each other.
Oh, okay.
And it's a shame we don't get a bunch of those. But that story, to summarize, is that she is in love with him, and he's in love with her. But she discovers he's Jewish. And then she's debating, like, well, could I go through with this? My life would be very much different. And a lot of it is the financial part. She's like, I would probably lose my business and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it's a really similar thing we see with Landauer and Fritz.
Yeah.
And I love the meeting first when Sally meets her and the juxtaposition of their kind of different classes in life. And I love how Sally, though, doesn't like take any shit or anything, and she gives her hand to the rich heiress and says, how do you do?
Yeah, I liked this scene. I liked Natalia Landau's, like, the way that her whole character. I enjoyed her whole character because it was
She's
very
a fancy rich one, and that's your jam.
Yes. But also, like, it was a good juxtaposition of her being like proper fancy, and then you get Maximilian, who is like wild and like fancy rich, and so you get a really good juxtaposition of people in this, and you have kind of an opposite to everybody.
Then the next plot point is that Sally is going to go meet her dad, but her dad doesn't show. And this scene was very effective for me because she, within 1 minute, goes from like, oh, it's fine, no big deal, to hating him, to then making excuses for him, and then just internalizing this worthlessness.
Yeah.
And saying, like, maybe he's right and I'm not worth caring about. You could say that it's very telegraphed and very typical because it is a movie, but man, I've seen that in people, and I've seen that cycle, and it seemed very, very true to life to me.
And we call that daddy issues.
Yeah, or like abusive relations. There's so many things
absolutely.
Where it goes from like, yeah, no big deal, and then pretty soon you're making excuses for them and saying it's your fault.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's a lot easier to blame yourself than to blame others, or just not have a reason for something.
Yeah, true.
And that tells you so much about her character and how she continues to seek this attention and love in wherever.
Yeah.
On stage.
And then we get the song Maybe This Time, which is the song that I knew best and have done at like show tune karaoke without even seeing Cabaret. I just know it.
So then this is something I want to ask you. So we get the beginnings of the romance with Brian right before Maybe This Time. So there was, of course, him saying that he doesn't go with girls or whatever the line was.
Yeah.
And then, well, maybe you were the right one. Those other three weren't the right ones.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a lot more, what's going on with Brian, because he might have a character that seems like he's the straight man.
Yeah.
But he's not in a few different ways. But for something like Maybe This Time, or for the title for Cabaret, for someone who hadn't seen all of it but knew the songs, did all of these songs seem very optimistic before?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Because when I hear Life is a Cabaret, people think of like, yeah, fun times, right? I'm like, no, that's not what that song's about.
Yeah, that one seems a little more optimistic upon like first introduction to it, but you do kind of like, I already kind of knew some of the like things that happen in, or like the darkness of this musical.
Sure.
Because Cabaret, like, in the musical theater community, is known as a very dark musical, and it's not one that you're going to do in school. It's not one that any children are going to be able to perform. So you know that like Cabaret is almost like forbidden fruit. It's not one that is done very often. And I think I knew that just from like knowing musicals. So I knew that it wasn't a super optimistic song, but I can see where people are coming from saying life is a cabaret. Like, it's a carefree, easy, fun song. Maybe this time I definitely knew the kind of like the subtext that goes within, like the feeling. And I just think it's like such a great song.
But I think it is maybe the most hopeful song.
Yeah.
But even then, that hopefulness is still restrained because it's not, this is going to happen for me. It's maybe this time. And I think watching this changed my 20-year-long opinion of Natasha Richardson being the Sally Bowles. When I saw this, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll give it to her. Because like we were saying earlier, Richardson's not as strong of a singer, but it works because she embodied what I thought Sally is, who's also like Natasha Richardson's a great singer. Like that's of course.
Oh no, we're not bashing her.
But she doesn't have the range of a Liza Minnelli. No. Not many do. So I thought, like, yes, Sally shouldn't be amazing. She's unsuccessful. But here we have Liza who can sing. Like,
yes, absolutely.
But she brought this rawness and desperation and youth. Not innocence, but like a wonder about certain
like a youngness.
Things. Yeah, definitely. That energy. And that's what made this great because she couldn't do the same thing Natasha Richardson's doing or any of the other ones. You have to bring your own thing to do it, to what suits your voice as well. Absolutely. And Liza can overpower anyone with her voice, so she had to find a different way into it. And she kind of goes too far. Yeah. She gets unhinged at points. Yeah. And that's why it's beautiful. That's where she's tapping into what Sally is. It's not just like, hey, look how good of a singer I am. Because she could do that all she wants, and so many of these other people could too, to just show off how good of a singer they are. But this is why I think Liza's so great. Because if you're singing in a musical, I feel like the quality of your singing is about 50% of what makes it good. And the other 50% is the, I don't know how to say performance, like the acting performance of it. Because you are acting the song. You are not just singing this song. This song has to give insight into your character or move the plot along or whatever it is. So just like if someone memorizes all of their lines, you know what, that's not enough. You have to do something more. And I think in a musical, you have to be able to act that song. And she does everything. Every time she's on stage, the emotions of that character are just flying at you. Yeah. She's bare on stage. She shows you everything when she's on stage. And that's why I think she's the best Sally now. I loved it.
Yeah, this song, like Mein Herr, gets very raw and emotional towards the end or like midway through, where you feel this desperate, like little girl almost in it.
She's begging. This is a song of her begging for this to finally work out for her.
Yeah, and she just wants like, maybe this time I'll win. And it's so raw in that moment, a few times that she sings that. And you can feel her heart breaking because her dad didn't show up and this guy wants something different from her, or they didn't pick her to be in this movie, or like whatever heartbreak she's having at the moment. You can feel it come up out of this song. And I feel like this song embodies so many problems in her life, but also it like fits perfectly in this moment of the movie.
Everybody loves a winner, so nobody loved me. Lady peaceful, lady happy, that's what I long to be. Well, all the odds are they're in my favor. Something's bound to begin. It's gotta happen sometime. Maybe this time I'll win.
lyrics in so many of these are so heartbreaking.
Yes.
Everybody loves a winner, so nobody loved me.
Yeah, no, there's some like really heartbreaking things, and she says, "Lady peaceful, lady happy, that's who I long to be," because she knows she's not that person. And I think, what's her name, the fancy lady, I think she's that lady peaceful, lady happy to Liza, or to Sally. And she sees this beautiful, perfect, poised woman, and doesn't realize that she also has problems. She just sees someone fancy with all this money.
Maybe this is the best song. I don't know.
But
there's those three, and we'll probably talk about which three are all just so good. But she's giving everything. She's begging the universe for some sort of support. She's bearing her soul. And then we go to the audience, and there's like 3 people clapping.
Yeah.
See, that's why this is a great movie. Not just a great musical, because it's not everyone jumps up and applauds like they do in every other movie. They're reacting in a way that emphasizes what she was talking about. Like, no, you're not getting any breaks.
Yeah.
It's not maybe this time and then it all happens and everything works out for her. It's maybe this time. Nope. Turns out no.
Nope, not this time. Yeah, you get this. Not every house is a packed house. And I feel like a lot of musicals make it look like, oh, I work at this super successful club and I just need my big break, even though it's busy every night.
Burlesque.
Yeah.
How the fuck is that place packed every night?
I don't know. And
where's the budget for all that? Like, the club in Burlesque had a bigger budget than the movie of Cabaret.
Yeah.
Also, this was a very low budget movie.
Was
it was $3 million.
Oh, wow.
Which was quite low for that time.
That's surprising. But yeah,
But also not.
It's
surprising in that a movie of this stature was made for that little, but not surprising. And when you look at what the stage and the costuming is, you're like, oh yeah, they went. It's actual cheap stuff. Not expensive stuff made to look cheap. All the tech end of stuff, I think they would have loved to have had some more money.
Oh, I bet.
So then we get the meeting with Max, who is a rich playboy type. And I liked how when she meets him, she said a lot of the same things she said when she first met Brian. So we kind of see that it's just a little bit of a routine.
I felt a little sad for Brian when Max came into the picture.
Oh, of course.
Because, you can see that he's like a more normal human that would exist in the world. And I think he's looking at Sally like someone that he could settle down with and like be with. And she's very clearly just living that glamorous, like, showbiz life where she just flits from one thing to the next thing. And like she says in her first song, Mine Hair, she's like, I'm a rover.
I actually disagree.
Oh.
I don't think Brian was looking to settle down with Sally.
No?
I think he was trying to delude himself into thinking he could. But we'll get into that stuff as it comes up.
Sounds good.
Then we have the song Money.
Yeah, which is funny. I liked it.
This is quite different in different versions, how the song goes. But it's one where, I didn't love the song, but it is another driving force of the characters, right? Especially right after Max gets there, it makes sense to cut to the song.
Yeah.
And then we go back to Max, and he's waking them up he rubs like a champagne bottle on her as she's sleeping.
Yeah, that's
and
weird.
It's like bringing food to a cat and they just kind of sniff it and start waking up. She's the same way. Like, wait, money? Rich stuff? Fancy things?
Champagne?
And she wakes up and then they go and, order caviar.
I think it's very funny that it's a bottle of Henkeltrocken, which is like a wine you can get now.
And then when she orders the caviar, of course, our cut then is right to a dead body.
Yeah.
Just to show, again, like, you're all caught up in these things, but this is still going on, and your money can only protect you for so long.
Very true.
And then there's that line, I think it is Max who says it, that the Nazis are just here to take care of the communists, and after that, we'll be able to control them.
Yeah. Little did they know, nobody could control them.
Then we get Two Ladies.
Yes, yeah.
I like this song in the 98 version. This one was a little grating because
It's very high pitched.
yeah, Gray he's doing a voice, of course, in this to play the character, and it's the longer he sings, it can be a little grating on you sometimes.
Yeah. It felt very fantastic because it is supposed to like suspend reality, but it also seems very like out there and wild. This whole, with all the lifts and the skirts and the big sheet and everything, like it's just very wild, I think.
It seems like exactly what you'd expect a kind of shitty body cabaret to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that, of course, is alluding to what's going to be happening when they go to Max's place.
Yeah.
We can talk about it a bit here. So when you see Brian kind of getting grumpy during this, you assume it's a jealousy.
Yes. A like, that's my woman kind of moment.
Oh, well, I was going to ask, a jealousy of whom?
So when you're first watching it, you don't actually know the second piece of...
But we did, upon our introduction to him, he says that he doesn't sleep with women.
Yes.
So we do have that.
Yeah. But he also double backs on that and says, like, I don't sleep with women anymore because...
Right.
Like, and you get the explanation. So it's, like, pretty easy to be like, oh, okay, yeah. He just, like, misspoke. And it sounded like a double meaning, but it wasn't.
Oh, see, that part to me did not. Because even when he's explaining, he just said, oh, I've done it 3 times and I never enjoyed it. That kind of is not doubling back to me. That's doubling down on like, yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't know. That wasn't how I read it the first time we watched it, not knowing kind of what develops later on in the movie.
I think we'll talk about it again later on when we get some of those revelations. But to me, I read Brian's character as being gay, not even being bisexual,
right.
But that he was gay and he's trying his best to not be, to fit in, because of course, it's not going to be an easy life. And even if you're in a place right now for the moment where maybe it's a little bit easier, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you got the Nazis.
We know.
And he's going to have to eventually go back to like England and not be living in cabarets
right.
eventually.
Yes, and having the historical context of the time, you know that things do not go well for anybody who isn't a like straight German Aryan person. And you kind of feel that danger. Once I'd kind of figured it out, especially in this scene, I think you see... Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's trying to fit this mold that is so very safe at the moment.
Yeah, so when you were saying that he was disappointed because he was looking forward to that life, I think those moments later when we see him like in the forest and he's just not quite there, it's his true self coming through, knowing that he can't live this lie.
Yeah.
That's a take. I'm not saying that is definitive by any stretch. You could read him as bisexual. You could read him as fully in love with Sally. I think that's legitimate as well. But I kind of thought he was convincing himself that he found a relationship that could work for him. Mm-hmm. And the way she is like free and liberated in so many ways, he's kind of feeling like this is probably the safest space for me.
Yeah. And he's trying to wedge himself in there.
Yeah. And he's like, and then maybe every now and then I can mess around with a dude too. And that would be nice. But
yeah,
who knows? It's a hard role, I would say, because you're getting the job. You look at this character and you get Michael York playing, and we never mentioned him yet, but I think he's fantastic and underappreciated because he doesn't get to do the big things that Liza gets to do, right? Everything that Michael York is doing in this is so small and subtle, and a lot of it does not get explained, while Liza gets to have entire songs telling you what she really means.
Yeah.
He doesn't, so everything is so dependent on his delivery of not a whole lot of lines, and then his reactions to things. And I love just watching him while other stuff is happening. You see him react, you see how upset he's getting, and then you have to question which part of those things made him upset. But I think Michael York gave a underappreciated, fantastic performance in this.
Yeah, I agree.
And he's someone who... Do you know Michael York?
Not really, no.
I bet he's in so many things, and rather than list them, I bet you will look this up while I'm talking and then be like, oh, I've seen like 20 movies he's in. Probably the stuff he did later in life that got popular, in your lifetime, in our lifetimes.
In my lifetime.
I watch movies from before my lifetime a lot.
Yes,
so.
True. But yes, I have definitely seen him in things, and he's been in a lot of big movies that maybe I haven't seen, but I do know who he is then. Yeah, interesting.
So then they go out, they're in the German countryside, and we get the only song not at the Kit Kat Club with Tomorrow Belongs to Me. And this is just an amazing piece of filmmaking and musical cinema, I'd say. I just can talk about this a lot. So let's.
Okay.
What do you think about it?
I can see, I know this isn't like a real song in the world other than in Cabaret.
Can I interrupt for a brief moment?
Yeah.
They were accused of being Nazi sympathizers because they're saying, like, you're using these real Nazi songs, and how dare you, this is a Nazi movie. Meanwhile, Kandra and Heb, both Jewish, wrote the song, which is distinctly anti-Nazi, but... Just like with so many things, if you just involve something, people don't take the time to look into the nuance. But yes, this was written for this.
Yeah, I just feel like it felt very nationalist and like it had that feeling. So I think they did a really good job of writing a song like this. I know it's meant to be anti-fascist and that kind of thing, but I can see why people would think that it was like pro-Nazi, because it totally sounds like an anthem that they would have had, I think.
First of all, the song, I think, is fantastic.
Oh, it's a great song, yeah.
But how this scene is directed is some of the more subtle work, because there's some real jarring stuff going on.
Yes.
But I think the most well-crafted direction, maybe of the entire movie. If you're watching a movie that deals with slavery, we're always going to be following the one white family who's smuggling people out, right? If it deals with Nazis, we're always with the freedom fighters.
Yes.
We just kind of ignore that the vast majority of people just go along with things. They're not necessarily the ones out there putting people in gas chambers, but they're not the ones fighting against it either.
Yeah.
They're the path of least resistance. This is what's happening, so I just go with it. Because the vast majority of people of Germany weren't evil human beings.
No.
They were weak-willed and went along with things, which the vast majority of humans will do. And we see that all the time. But it's so much easier for us not to confront that. In our movies, we want to be along on the ride with the good guys who are fighting the good fight, that we have generations of hindsight to see, like, yep, this is the good side, that's the bad side.
Yeah.
Or we want the bad people to be like, yes, I'm twirling my mustache, I'm a big evil guy, I'm going to kill all these people because that's who I am, and I'm evil, I'm an unfathomable evil.
Yeah.
What we don't like to see is just some guy who could be anyone being like, you know what? They got some good points. I'm going along with it.
Yeah, that like every day, who could be anybody in your life.
And that's what this movie does a great job of highlighting. It shows how easily hatred can be spread when not confronted. And I think that's what I was talking about when I was saying that this movie is about the dangers of political apathy. And I hope everyone listening to us now or watched this movie will take those ideals to heart, because of course, I'm sure people think this of every time they have lived in, but I feel like there's a lot of things that are happening in our time, which is very easy to just be like, you know what? It's so much easier to not say anything right now. And
in
just kind of like
our province, in
the world, in
city?
our country, in North America, and other parts, there's just a lot. And there probably kind of always is, but it's just kind of underscoring the idea of say something.
Yes.
But as it relates to this scene, how it starts with this one boy singing. And you're like, oh, this is a nice song. This is an idyllic little German village song.
Yeah.
And the song starts beautifully, just like these movements do. These movements start with the idea of hope, of something new. And then a couple more people joined in. And you're like, okay, there's a couple people singing it. But then when it pans down to that armband, then we know. And it instantly, for us, with those generations of hindsight, goes from this inspirational or idyllic country song to terror.
Yes.
It goes to something truly frightening. And how the song spreads through the group of people, I feel, is a very intentional metaphor for the spread of Nazism throughout Germany. Mm-hmm. It starts with one inspirational figure. It goes to a couple people who are joining it. And then once there's a few people doing it and nobody is saying anything to them, the other people are thinking of one of two things. Like, oh, I can say this now too. And no one's going to stop me because I believe those things.
Yeah.
So then the next group of people gets on. And then the other people are the ones who are like, oh, everyone's doing this.
I better get up and say.
I better get on board too.
Because you do see at the beginning of this song going, as people are starting to stand up and sing and like sing really forcefully, I guess, like passionately. You can see a couple people in the crowd looking as their neighbors stand up, right? And they're like, oh, okay. Like,
and the one old man who's just doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. And then you see these people, other than the one old man that you mentioned, you see these people get up towards the end or like the middle of the song because everybody else is standing. And it was also kind of known that like, if you didn't go along with it, you probably weren't going to be okay after. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there was that like fear as well. And so you can see everybody jump up and you can feel kind of, again, that frantic energy of like, I need to be seen supporting this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a great example of how hatred can spread through a culture done in this one scene of just people singing a song.
Yeah.
That's why I think this might be the height of the direction of this movie.
Yeah. And some of the imagery in this movie, having that historical context and like knowing what happens in a year or two, it makes me very uncomfortable to see.
When you were saying that you cried multiple times in Sound of Music, this got me closer than anything.
Oh.
Because I felt actually... I watch a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
They don't scare me.
No.
This gave me a very visceral reaction.
Yeah.
I found it truly frightening. And I know we can say like, yeah, the Nazis are scary and we are detached from it and we don't have that same fear. Something in this, seeing how it spread and seeing what you first think is joy on people's faces turn to hatred was truly frightening in a way that I haven't seen something in another movie scare me that much in a while.
Yeah, and
it was very
agree.
well done.
The visualization of the swastika and those uniforms and the salute and everything, that I definitely had like a little jolt in my stomach when you see those things, because they are in our time like known as not good, and you don't display those things and you don't see those things very often. I mean, you do,
but you do,
but it's never in a good context. And so it was like a little jarring to me to see those things, and in the Sound of Music as well, just like on display like that, and just feeling like, oh, like the chill of like knowing what's happening and what's gonna happen.
But the thing that was different, because I watch, straight up war movies where there's Nazis. That doesn't like have that same effect to me. Nothing in Sound of Music had that kind of effect on me. But here it's just people.
Yeah.
It's not the soldiers of Sound of Music or any of the war movies. Yeah,
in the like big city in the town square, that kind of thing.
These are just like a bunch of village girls who I know would want me dead given the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
That's scary. That is scary. Yeah.
I need to like move on.
Okay.
But it's so good. Things progress a little bit more with Landauer and Fritz. There's the scene about him jumping on the running board. And for some reason, that always stuck with me when she's like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know. I've never done something like that before.
Yeah.
And then we get the reveal of, screw Max. And she says, I am.
Yeah.
And how the performance of both of them in this, because she's saying it to hurt him.
Yes.
And then he says, me too.
It's like
And
fact.
you see her reaction.
Yeah.
Because in her life, in these type of situations, I would assume she's been the one who's kind of like giving this kind of news.
Yeah.
And she did not see that coming. And you get to see her be like shocked and then truly hurt again.
Yes.
That we haven't really seen that come through since the time with her father or when she's on stage.
Yeah, you get the real emotion.
And of course, she then quickly covers it up with, I can't remember what she says. Oh, like, oh, you two bastards or whatever it is. But when she doesn't know what to say at first, Liza's like a good actress as well. I feel like in my lifetime, she's only been a joke.
Yeah, or like a caricature.
Yeah.
Like it's very...
We're of an age where we know her as Lucille Austero more than someone who won. I think she won a Tony and an Oscar by the time she was like 24.
That's crazy.
She was something.
Yeah, because she has an EGOT.
And you see it here.
Yeah, and she's just, in a way that lots of performers only like dream of being talented.
And now, since we watched this, I watched some interviews of her much later in life talking about the movie. Mm-hmm. What I used to see in her as a eccentricism of like celebrity kind of thing.
Yeah.
I now see as complete earnestness in everything. And I kind of love it. I might go watch a bunch of her stuff now.
You're right. I do think of her as her character in like Arrested Development, and she plays these cameo roles and things.
Well, she's usually playing herself.
Yeah.
Or a heightened version of herself like to make fun of it.
Extra far version of herself. And so it's really interesting to kind of see her just be her, because I did go into this thinking about the Liza Minnelli of later years, and it's just really interesting to see how good of a performer she actually is.
Yeah,
I guess that's what I'm leading to, because she's incredible in this, and she totally deserves that EGOT. And I think it's just really impressive, the talent that she has, and just like how amazing she is in this movie. It's my love letter to Liza Minnelli.
Wholeheartedly agree. I didn't know. And shame on me for not knowing. Because there's a world of people out there who are like, yeah, of course, she's fucking Liza. There's a reason she's like so iconic. And
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I just feel like I've done her wrong because I didn't know how great she was.
So then after this argument between Sally and Brian, he goes out and he can't take the Nazis anymore. So he gets into that fight, gets beat up real bad, goes to the hospital. Oh, Landauer's dog is killed. That was real sad.
That was another like really hard scene to see. And the fear that she had. Mm-hmm. It was, there were some scenes in this movie that were like, you knew this stuff happened, but it's really hard to kind of watch it unfold on the screen.
And then we hear, God damn it, I'm going to have a baby. That whole scene, that was kind of fun. And then they just like get hammered and decide to get married.
Yeah, it was a different time.
Well, yeah, that's First off, there's all those prairie oysters she was eating. That just sounds terrible. But she says this thing when they're drunk celebrating that it's like the saddest thing. And she says, I guess babies have to love you no matter what.
Yeah. And that's when you get to see a really like uncensored version of just how badly she wants to be loved.
Yeah.
Is that like, oh, maybe I'll have this baby because babies have to love you.
And that's a very real thing that people do as
yes,
well.
Yes, absolutely. People have children so that they have someone who needs them. And it's really interesting to see her go through that thought process of like, yeah, I'll have the baby and we'll live happily ever after, like a fairy tale, because that is how she kind of sees her life.
Yeah. It's an amazingly well-written tragic character.
It is.
I hate when people kind of relegate this to a 70s manic pixie dream girl, because there's so much more going on.
Oh, totally,
here.
yeah.
Then back at the house, we have Fritz and Brian coming in, and there's the bit about like, oh yeah, they're bankers. The Jews are bankers and communists, and someone going like, well, how could they be bankers and communists? And the guy's like, oh, they'll get you one way or they'll get you the other. And the fact that all this like conspiracy theory stuff comes from just some regular guy who we've heard from before shows how insidious that kind of thinking is. And that's what this movie does a great job of doing as well. Like the Nazis aren't some evil force over there. They are right here. They are your neighbors.
Yeah. And the idea of this propaganda of how easily it spreads.
Well, we see it all the time.
We do.
And now that's such a hard thing in my day-to-day life when I meet someone and I'm like, oh, this person's great. And like, oh, are they a Nazi? They might be a kind of might be a bit of a Nazi.
That is something that is like still prevalent and that I worry about.
There was a dude on my hockey team not 2 years ago who had a big SS tattoo on
Really?
him. Yeah. And I would just see that, and then he would talk to me. For those of you who don't know, I am not a white man, and he would talk to me and like be very nice to me. And I'm like, but like I know what that is. That's not it's not something that kind of looks like something. He had Iron Crosses and SS stuff. He had
straight up
Nazi tattoos all over him.
And that's like, I don't understand how you can live in the world if you feel like that.
Well, you could run for office and you'd probably do pretty well.
True.
There's a lot of them out there.
I know
Every time I say stuff like this, like hot takes of, hey, Nazis are bad, we get bad reviews. That's why our Spotify's down so much, because on the RRR episode, I was against Indian nationalism. Right. And I said Muslims are people too, and people didn't like that.
Interesting.
So go rate us on Spotify. Bring our rating back up.
Yes, please.
We got crushed. But yeah, how insidious it is of just being, the calls are coming from inside the house, right? Yeah. It's not just some unknowable evil out there. It is right here.
Yeah, it's your neighbors.
And Fritz reveals that he is Jewish as well, but this fear of being ostracized and hurt is greater than his love. Or is it? That's what he's going to try to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I liked their wedding scene, but you do, with the like hindsight of what actually happened there, after, you also feel this fear for them.
Yeah. Because
you know that like they're happy right now because they've accepted like who they are and what they like, what their religion is and everything, and they're having a happy moment, but you know it's not going to be good for them in the future.
And that's just another way that this movie challenges you in ways another musical for sure definitely wouldn't. But we have these two people falling in love and this man revealing his true self and being his true self. And in any other movie, that is a point of celebration. And here we have, of course, we have the wedding scene, but then we know that they probably died because of that.
Yeah, or because she's rich, they may have made it out, but
maybe.
It's not going to be good for them.
Yeah. Their life, as they know it, is definitely over.
Yes,
in one way
absolutely. And you know that it's only downhill from here.
And before we have the wedding, we get If They Could See Her, the song, which again plays with things where you think, oh, this is some silly song about being in love with a monkey.
Yeah.
And no, it is a metaphor for what they're going through of being in love with someone who somebody else deems unworthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a weird song.
How does it feel? Because I've, of course, I know the ending of that song. I know what it's about. But watching it, because I assume that song you probably didn't
No,
know.
I've never heard that song.
Take me through it when you're watching it, going from singing to a monkey to the switch at the end.
Yeah, I saw it coming, but also didn't see it coming because I also didn't really want to believe that that's where this was going. I went from like, oh, this is funny. He's singing about like maybe how ugly his girlfriend is, or like if you could just see her the way I see her, you'd like her. And then as it gets more specific what he's singing about, you start to realize that it's not just about being a monkey or like having an unattractive girlfriend or like whatever, that he seems to be singing about. And then it's like, oh no, this is going where I think it's going. And it's very disappointing and I don't like it. But it is a good way to show just what Germany was like in 1931, I think, when this is set, and just how awful it was getting even before everything got real awful.
And by doing switches like that, it kind of makes you think about things and take new points of view very quickly, because you start forming your opinion on one thing and then you learn you're talking about something else and you kind of had that in your mind already. And it's a good little tool for getting people to switch their point of view, to take themselves out of any preconceptions by doing little tricks like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's other musicals, and off the top of my head right now, I cannot name another one where they do jokey things like this, and it is just about the surface level.
Yeah.
Like about the looks, or like, oh, she's a monkey, or like, it's just not quite as deep as this movie or this show is. And I think that they do a really good job of it, but yeah, it really makes you think at the end if you're mindlessly enjoying the song and then you realize that it's actually anti-Jewish like ending.
And then you kind of lose the fact that there's some just great lyrics in this one too.
Yeah.
When we're walking together, they sneer if I'm holding her hand, but if they could see her through my eyes, maybe they'd all understand.
Yeah.
Well, that's really good.
Yeah.
And then the whole, like, just why can't everyone leave us alone? Why can't you just live and let live?
Yeah.
It's very simple, but yeah, very poignant still.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let us live our life.
And then we get the wedding, and there's that scene where they are kind of just laying out in the woods having like a picnic or something.
Yeah.
And Cliff is just, or Brian is just off.
Yeah.
Right? There's no real reason given. And like a lot of Brian's motivation, we don't always
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just something that happens with him off screen a lot of the time. And at times it's frustrating, but then it's also kind of fun that we can try to piece it together. Of course, I've already been saying what I think was going on, but what did you feel at the time there? He was just having a bad day.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of turmoil in his life, obviously, because he is like pretty much fighting who he is as a person throughout the entire movie. And I think he and Max probably had a bad moment and that messed him up or something. I just kind of assumed that that's what it was. And then also people just have emotions.
Yeah.
People are in moods sometimes. But it was really interesting to see him down like that and how it affects Sally too, because all of a sudden she's like, well, we can't be together because you're like this. And it's a switch that flips, and it's very abrupt. So there's no lead up to it. And maybe in the show there is.
Lead up to
Sally coming back without her fur coat and with no baby.
Yeah, so she goes and has an abortion, and he takes it hard, and he's kind of saying like that you had no right and all of that kind of stuff. And his emotions at that point are understandable. And when she's telling him, she's still kind of giving a performance.
Yeah.
Right? She's always giving a performance. And then even at a time like this, she's like doing bits.
Yeah.
Almost. I think that comes from she feels like she can never be herself. She feels and she believes that she is truly unlovable, and this is either a distancing mechanism
Yeah.
or perhaps a performance because she feels like this performance person is more likable and lovable than she is herself. 'Cause life is a cabaret after all.
Yes.
She's always on.
Yeah.
And she needs those applause. So here is another time where we can kind of go back on what we think's going on with Cliff, because she starts talking about being afraid of what their life would be, that she eventually would want to go back to the clubs. And then she says, and you would, and she kind of trails off. And he says, like, say it. And she doesn't say it.
No.
So that's why I thought he's gay. Of course, not 100%, because no one's really 100% anything.
Yeah.
But he has some wiggle room, clearly, because they've been sleeping together.
Mm-hmm.
But she knows who he really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think he knows who she really is because she doesn't let anyone. He
Right.
knows more than anybody does, probably in the world.
Yeah.
But when she trails off like that, at first I thought it was, and you'll resent me for it.
Right.
But the way he goes, say it, and she won't say it, that makes me think that there was something else.
Yeah.
That she knows that their life together wouldn't be...
Real.
No, it would be a performance
Yeah.
on his part now.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting thing, too, because we have Brian.
Yeah.
We have Brian being this character who is supposed to be, I know, like the term is the straight man, but
Yeah.
being someone who is free from all of the kind of, like, Sally's a pretty crazy character.
From
She's
all
a
the
lot.
drama. Yeah.
He's someone who is supposed to be kind of the audience's way in a lot of the time,
Yeah.
as being a quote unquote normal person. And then we start learning that he's living a sort of double life.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think. This is no means like definitive or anything. This is just because so much of what goes on with his character we don't get to see, and this is what I took away from it.
Right.
But I think he prefers men, and it's also kind of sad because being someone who prefers men but then is willing to marry Liza Minnelli kind of happens to her a couple times.
Yeah.
And then also back when she revealed that she had been sleeping with Max, she said something about like he's suave and he knows how to treat a woman. I don't know that she meant like spending money and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that. And I don't think it's about being romantic or kind, because he's clearly like he's a good guy and he treats her well from everything we could see.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that means like on the sexual side of things. That's what I took that line to mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. This show is so deep.
I just love that every character could be talked about for a long time. There's not a lot of, there's no simple answers in this movie. Like I said, this movie lives in the gray areas. There's not a lot of black and white here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then with that, Brian goes home
Yeah.
and they shake hands.
Yeah.
And that's just it.
It's kind of an unsatisfying ending because I expected there to be some big passionate goodbye, and really all she's doing is just like waving as she's walking away.
Yeah.
I thought there would be like a little bit more, but like I get it.
I feel like every movie that we've done so far that I say like, oh, this is like a fundamental piece of 70s cinema, you're like, yeah, it's good, but it felt kind of unsatisfying in the end. That's 70s? Part of it. That's the world, man.
Yeah.
Endings are unsatisfactory.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to end it.
But you know what is pretty satisfactory is Liza Minnelli's next and last song, her performance of the titular Cabaret.
Cabaret.
This is the one, you look at the lyrics and it's like, what good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play.
Yeah.
Life is a cabaret, old chum, come to the cabaret. So you're like, yeah, this is a song about not sitting and being sad.
Yeah.
It's about going out and having a good time. And I think it intentionally tries to make you think that. Like, she's getting over it.
Yes.
And she's going on. And then you start listening to it. And my favorite bit is her story about Elsie, you know, with whom she shared 4 sorted rooms in Chelsea.
Yes.
who was a sex worker and dies. And when she died, everyone was just like, well, yeah, she drank all the time. She did a lot of drugs and now she's dead. That's what happens. But her takeaway from that is, yes, that's how I'm going out. Her takeaway from her friend overdosing or committing suicide, one of those two, was that that's the best case scenario. That's all she can hope for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crushing.
Yeah, wow.
Come to the cabaret. And as for me, I made my mind up back in Chelsea. When I go, I'm going like Elsie. Start by admitting from cradle to tomb, it isn't that long a stay. Life is a cabaret, old chum. It's only a cabaret, old chum. And I love a cabaret.
You know me, I have a inner nihilist in me, but I love the line of start by admitting from cradle to tomb isn't that long a stay. I love that, but I take it in a better way, I think, than she does.
Yeah.
I think being okay with your mortality and confronting it is good to put you at peace.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's where she's going with it. I think people look at this song as a celebratory, inspirational song, but I feel like this song is either a song of denial, or at least that it's an admission that she cannot exist in the outside world, so that all of her life is a stage, because that's where she has control and that's where she feels she can be loved.
Yeah. And where she can be the like sparkly happy version of herself.
Yeah.
There's no worries on the stage.
Yes. Yeah. So when she's saying life is a cabaret, she's saying pretend to get through things.
Yeah. And she's also the most, not relaxed is probably the wrong word, but like the least frantic in this song.
I don't know. I think when she's saying, I think it's the line is Chelsea when she like is like breaking.
True.
I think she's near tears. I think at the end of it, her eyes to me look like she has very wet eyes, and I probably was right there with her.
Yeah. That's she's got a hard road in this movie.
Yeah.
And
she's not doing herself any favors, and no one else is doing her any favors either.
No. And you know what good is sitting and wallowing in it?
What good is sitting alone in your room?
Go
Might as well come hear the music play.
be on stage. Yeah. Huh.
But her life's a stage. And it's also doubles up, of course, from what we were talking about at the very beginning, the political apathy that she is just going to insulate herself in this literal cabaret.
Yes.
To protect her from anything outside, from relationships that have gone wrong, from her father, from the Nazi rise, right? She's unwilling to deal with any of it. And her apathy, or maybe not even apathy, her distinct decision to not engage with anything that she doesn't find pleasurable is, of course, like a great metaphor for people and how something like Nazism can take control of a country, right?
Yeah.
We just don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
And why would you? It's terrible. But you have to.
Yeah.
Life is not a cabaret.
It's not. You have to wake up and actually deal with the world. Huh. Well.
At least that's my take on this song. I know a lot of people think it's something different, but to me, it's a song of willful denial.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you.
Also, fucking amazing.
Great song.
What a performance.
It is a great song.
Well, that leaves us with just the reprise. Do you say reprise or reprise?
Reprise.
Oh, then we get the welcome in reprise.
The finale?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not the finale. I think Cabaret is the finale.
Oh, I'm looking at the original recording, and it's billed as finale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, after
Sure.
Cabaret.
Just like the song before, Cabaret should be inspirational in its like epic tone, but it's not. It's about the opposite, at least in my opinion. Now we have this welcoming, familiar song. The first time we don't have reprises in this.
No.
It's not like Sound of Music where every song gets 4 reprises. God.
No, it's not. There's nothing repeated. This is the only time.
So for the first time, we get something that should be familiar, welcoming, because the song is
Welcome and bienvenue.
exactly. So we should have something welcoming and familiar for the first time in this movie that's just been unpleasant.
Yes.
An unpleasant watch, a difficult watch, an intentionally difficult watch at much of the time. So now we get this, and they turned it into this haunting, nightmarish version
Yes.
that is scary. And then he's saying, life is beautiful. Right? And at the beginning, he tells you, "Well, come in, forget your troubles. We have no troubles here."
Yeah.
And then at the end, he's like, where are your troubles now? Forgotten? No.
No.
You've shown us all of our troubles.
Yeah.
And I love that they're asking, like, oh, yeah, everything's good now, huh? You
Yeah,
had such a great time.
so great.
And with this eerie, nightmarish music going on behind it, and this grotesque imagery too. There's all these shots that they're very intentionally unflattering and unnerving. And he's just telling you, like, yeah, now all your troubles are forgotten. But of course we couldn't, because we cannot be in this insular world of the cabaret. We have seen the outside world. We've seen what happened to Sally and Brian. We've seen what's going to happen to Landauer and Fritz.
Yeah.
And we've seen the Nazis, right? And we have the hindsight.
Yes.
So we know
So we
what's
know what's
happening to all
happening,
of these people. So of course, no, our troubles are not forgotten, MC. Thanks
Yeah.
for asking. Because you can't forget all of that.
No.
You can't live in the cabaret.
No, that's not how life works.
That's why I think that the key messaging of this movie is to confront these things. Like Life is a Cabaret, this song that people love to sing at show tune karaoke to be lots of fun and like, hey, I'm the life of the party, is a call to all of you who are just going along with things, saying like, oh, someone else will sort things out. That song is about like, no, you cannot live like that. Sally is not someone to be emulated. She is a broken person. And this was a broken system and a broken world that created all of that. So yeah, that's why I think that's one of the key takeaways of the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if that's not enough, we then go to a mirror, which is on stage. And we just have that kind of piercing, shrill note that's being held.
Yeah.
And now we start going through all of the people, but they're distorted, of course, because this is a distorted view of the world. And we see there's a lot of armbands now.
Yeah.
There's more.
You can see them really clearly.
Yeah, the mirror shows who's in the audience, and they are the Nazis now. And the first performance, there was the one.
Yes.
Now there's noticeably more. But when they are filming this mirror, that is, of course, putting the mirror back on us,
Yeah.
the viewer. And it's going back to that point of, if you are passive, if you simply stand by and don't stand up against injustice, you are part of the problem.
Yeah.
And you feel like you have the safety of a crowd, right? When you are one of a million people, well, why is it up to me to say something?
Yeah.
Right? And by going and putting that mirror out there and singling people out, it's also kind of showing you like, no, that is not an excuse. You cannot hide in a crowd at a time like this. And I think it's a bizarre note to go out on, being a musical that ends with silent still of a distorted mirror image of a Nazi, but God, it works.
It does.
And that's why Cabaret's my favorite musical.
I love it. It's great. I don't know what else to say. I feel like we really summed it up.
Yeah. I have a lot about Fosse and all of, but I think maybe we just end there. Anything else, Samantha? You love this one too?
I love this one too. It's a great show. I really want to see the stage production.
Me too.
Well, there is a 2024 revival.
Well, let's go.
Yeah, I just think that everyone should see it. I feel like I say that about every movie that we do, but everyone should see it.
I don't know if you said that about Billy Madison.
No, I don't think I did.
Everyone should see that too.
I think this is an important movie. Yeah. So we will see you next week when we enter the holliest, jolliest season of the year.
No, we just finished Spooktober.
No, we're going the other direction. We're going to Christmas time.
Oh, right. So what are we doing next week?
So next week, Indy and I will have spoiler-free holly jolly Christmas things of the week or the fortnight. And then I will be revealing what we will be watching for the week after. So see you next week. Bye.
Auf Wiedersehen. A bientôt.